Good afternoon, folks. Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started. Welcome to Textiles and Costuming. We all have a lot we want to talk about on this panel today, and we are going to take some questions as we go as well, but just please wait until we call you if you have a question or comment. I am Elizabeth. I'm moderating today. My background is in historical costume, as well as modern sewing and teaching sewing. I've been doing historical costume for over 25 years. I've been teaching sewing for about 15, including teaching historical methods, but mostly modern methods, and just working a lot with fabric and what we can make fabric do and what we cannot make fabric do. So I would love to hear all of our panelists, if you can tell us your name and a bit of your background.
My name is, am I on?
You are not.
Thank you. All right, my name is Sara Spookystitch. My background is primarily in theater. I started with cosplay, but I work in theatrical costuming professionally and have been for about 10, 11 years now. I got a degree in it and all that boring garbage. So I've handled a lot of fabric through my day job in theater, but I, in cosplay, really like making fabric do non-fabric-y things. I like things that are structural and interesting, and mascots and tailoring and corsetry, and like how we can make fabric do interesting stuff.
My name is Baird, and I came to costuming through the Renaissance Festival when I started there in 1988. Retired in 2021, so that is 33 years for those of you who can remember. And what's interesting is so I was a performer out there. I was also ran the costume shop for a few years, so I got to know fabrics there. But one area that I never really get to talk about at CONvergence too often was that I actually ran a fabric department for an event company for several years, for like 6 or 7 years. And which pretty much made me the queen of all laundry. And this is the first time I actually get to specifically talk about fabric, so that's where it's actually pertinent finally.
Hello.
Okay.
Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm Rue. My background is also theatrical costuming. I tend to focus a lot on making garments last. Particularly, I did a lot of musical theater, and you need those pants to not split in the middle of those high gigs. So yeah, that's what I like to focus on is making costumes that will last and what fabrics are best for that.
My name is Jen Schultz, and I have done just 7 years of costuming, and not as a professional, but in community theater. And so I know all about making sure pants don't split, and how to sew them up backstage in 30 seconds and that kind of thing. I have also taught mostly children, some adults, sewing for just under 20 years, and I do paper making and book making as some of my other artistic activities when I'm not doing that.
Awesome, and I just wanted to shout out, if anyone has an open seat next to you, if you can just raise a hand. There's people in the back maybe still looking for a seat. If you want to grab a seat, go for it, folks. Okay. So the first thing I really think of here is that with the different backgrounds that we're seeing with our panelists, I really tend to do more historical costuming, which I think has a lot of difference from theater costuming, depending on what your end goal is here. So I would love to just dig in by thinking about what are your fabric needs and how do they differ based on your costume's end use. So for me as a historical costumer, I want my fabrics to be as close to the original garment that I'm trying to replicate as possible. If that means I can't wash it, that's fine for me. If you're making something for a theater, that might differ. Anybody want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, you absolutely need to be able to do laundry. I worked especially a lot with teenagers in theater. If we couldn't wash the costumes, we wouldn't use them. So yeah, definitely, you want, with a lot of historical theater, you want to get the look of the historical, but you really also want it to be really durable and like silk is just out of the question. You don't use silk. Cotton, on the other hand, you can use. So yeah, that's.
I will say from like an additional theatrical perspective, I work with several different theaters. The one I just got off a contract with is in Wisconsin. It's like outdoor theater, so it's all like, if it's not polyester, it doesn't go on the outdoor stage. We had like a whole thing with a dress that was just sort of falling apart as things because it was just a bad fabric choice. Whereas some of my other work is in opera, and that only has to last for like 5 performances. Because it's not a long run, it's not outside, it's not being sweat, so we can do more dry clean only stuff. So it really, even in theater, depends on specifically what kind of use you've got going on. Like I do a lot of tailoring for opera, and it's all dry clean only. So it also depends on the garment, because you can only make a suit coat so washable with it still looking like a suit coat.
Very, very true. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into the interior of the coat that makes it not washable. And yeah, and that's, so my history with being out at Renaissance Festival, and especially, the most recent thing I was doing out there, I sweated a lot. So everything had to be washable and everything had to be cotton. And out at festival, when I was in the costume shop, people were cooking in these costumes. Which made things a little tougher because cotton and linen breathe a lot better, but they also really love to hang on to grease. And so it was like we had to find, we did a lot of broadcloth, we did a lot of cotton poly blends, a lot of poplins, which are, they kind of have that breathability of cotton, but then they also, like you said, the outdoor stuff, you gotta have some of that polyester, you need that durability. Because these are costumes that are gonna be, and we had costumes that we made in the costume shop back in 1998 that I saw back in 2021. People were still wearing the costumes. 2023, people were still wearing the costumes that we made in the shop because we had to make clothing and they had to be durable. So yeah, you have to pick those more durable fabrics.
So you just mentioned cooking though, and I just want to throw out there as well, if we're all aware, that wool is really the most flame retardant fiber. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing some sorts of historical impression or reenactment, it's often suggested or required that you are wearing a wool apron if you're cooking over an open fire. And it is washable, you just can't machine wash it.
Yeah. And just disabusing the notion of wool as, if you say, it's wool, it's heavy. It's like, no, there are shirt weight wools. There are midweight wools that are great for that kind of thing.
So as long as we're on laundering, I would love to talk about distressing as well. I feel like one of the things you see a lot in cosplay is that when you make your beautiful new costume, it looks very new and clean. And what are some things that you guys would do to distress or age or just make something look more lived in?
I cleaned my house in costume, with a costume piece. It actually works really well.
In with chores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you get all the dust off the top of all of your door frames, the cleaning solution and the dust from your door frames, it creates a very organic stain pattern. So yeah, it is. If you need something to look really, really dirty, clean your house, dust your house with it.
If you don't want to have to break it in with quite as much sweat. There are lots of different organic materials that you can use that come from right around the house that you can, depending on how dyeable the fiber of your fabric is, that you can use to make things age. You can use tea dye fabrics. You can use spray inks if you like to go to Michael's and hang around and buy interesting stuff. And the other problem with spray inks is it can take a little longer to dry. You can use acrylic paints, depending on how important it is to you to ever be able to wash that thing again. It just depends on what you need to achieve. But if you're starting with, an undyed fabric or just even something that has already been dyed, but it's a light color, you can easily find on the internet ways to use different organics, things you might even have composted under other circumstances, to come up with, browns and yellows and greens and even some warmer colors. And once you have practiced with that a little bit, you can kind of tie-dye those things as well. And there's lots of different fun things that you can do with your own hands.
Did you do that with the piece you're wearing right now?
The head covering that I have on, I think is not organically dyed. Actually, I think it is probably 3 different kinds of commercial dye. But it has also had the snot washed out of it because it's been several different costumes already. And so, as pieces get more worn out and less usable in the costume shop, that's when I start to hoard them, because I really like things that look like they're worn out and broken in and, kind of post-apocalyptic.
One thing, because you might want your costumes to look lived in, but you don't necessarily want them to actually fall apart. A fabric that frays a lot, one thing you can do is sew just a straight stitch right above where you want the fraying to stop, and that will prevent it from fraying past that point. So, yeah.
Let's talk about fabric choice. I feel like we could have definitely started off with fabric choice, but there was just so many interesting things I want to dig into. So when you are considering the next thing you're going to make, a lot of us are working from a reference image, whether you're doing historical or cosplay or character, you're starting with a reference image and kind of breaking that down and figuring out what textile am I going to choose to recreate this thing. There's a lot of different ways we can go. A lot of us, if we're doing it on the cheap, I definitely am sometimes, we see a lot of cotton broadcloth because you're trying to get the colors. And you can get the colors in cotton quilting. But quilting cotton just doesn't have a lot of drape. So it's hard to really get the impression of the drape of the original garment by just using a quilting cotton. What are some of your go-tos?
So when I'm first considering, I'm looking at a costume and breaking down and thinking about materials. I'm thinking a lot about texture personally. I'm thinking about color and texture specifically. And also about the wearability of it. So when I'm picking out a fabric, I'm picking out the fiber and I'm picking out the weave, which are 2 distinct things that we should talk about. So you've got the fiber, so you've got your wool, your cotton, whatever. I'm thinking if I want a natural fiber, if I want the way that a synthetic fiber will behave, and then I'm looking at the weave and what kind of texture that's going to give me, because I'm wearing a suede cloth right now. I wanted that kind of leathery look without spending the money on actual suede. Same with the faux fur. I decided to sacrifice a little bit of breathability in that section, whereas this is a linen. So the important part, my torso, is still nice and breathable. But also, I really wanted this texture here, so I'm thinking about all of those things. My personal cosplay style leans very cartoonish and clean and clear and strong silhouettes. So I don't do a lot of distressed work or anything, but I want to keep that clear cartoonishness while also still having interesting textures, and I choose to do that via picking interesting textiles that might have a little bit of texture in them versus doing something like heavy distressing work.
Well, like you said, the difference with fiber versus the weave. So I assume most people kind of know what the basic natural fibers are out there and the basic synthetic fibers that are out there. I don't know if anybody needs a differentiation on that.
We could do a whole discussion on just
Could
fibers
be a panel.
Yeah. Well, I'm just talking about the fibers. It's you got wool, silk, cotton, hemp, bamboo, linen, and then on your synthetic sides, that's where you're finding your polyesters, your rayons, your acrylics, and then there's one other one that I can't think of.
I want to give a shout out to rayon here, because rayon occupies a sort of in-between space between a
that's
natural
where
and
it's going.
synthetic fiber. Yeah. So rayon, if you're not aware, is made from cellulose or wood pulp.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a natural fiber. In fact, when you wear it, it breathes like a natural fiber. If you compost it, it composts. But it's a really man-made process to create rayon. It's a chemical bath sort of deal. So that's what we call man-made fiber.
Yeah. It's similar to you might see in a lot of modern garments modal or whatever it is.
Modal, viscose.
Yeah, it's
bamboo,
the same chemical
same
process but with
yeah.
bamboo.
Yeah. So then you're getting that combination, and then you got your cotton poly blends. Is kind of you get a best of both worlds kind of scenario. But yeah, with linen and wool and cotton, you're going to get the breathability, but they're going to wrinkle more easily. They're going to be a little harder to wash or unable to wash them. So yeah, I think you really have to weigh you know, which one, you know, how much maintenance do you want to do versus how comfortable do you want to be?
I think this is easier if you do straight up historical costuming, which is mostly what I do, because if they didn't have synthetics at that time, you just don't use synthetics. Like, that's it, you know? Sometimes I'll cheat, I'll use synthetics, but in general, I want to look for something that looks as natural as possible.
I will say for myself, when looking at reference photos, I like to think, I do a lot of fantasy combined with historical. I like to think what materials might the character have had access to, for sure. And then even if they might not have had polyester, I know they had access to like brocade. So I might choose a polyester brocade because they had brocade even though they didn't have polyester. So there's also that type of balance.
It's kind of hard to find a brocade or a damask or a jacquard these days that isn't a blend.
And mostly we're going to see it in the upholstery section, which is often way too heavy for garments. It's hard to find one that is not couch weight.
Someone tell that to theater designers. I keep getting handed upholstery fabrics to make jackets out of.
And they don't have to be, so that, you know, they have to be durable. And couches don't need to breathe. So couches don't sweat. So they can totally use synthetic fabrics.
And one of my mentors was like, you know, for any costume you need, go to the upholstery section first.
Yeah, I was also told this in my baby Renaissance fair days. You're just going to go straight to the upholstery section and you make an upholstery dress. And there's just something about that weight that kind of feels and looks wrong. And again, that goes back to drape or how a fabric moves. So
If you do want to use that kind of thing, think about like structure and what kind of structured garments you would. Like I said, I'm usually handed out for jackets by designers because they know that heavier upholstery weight will translate pretty decently to a jacket versus like a whole like big voluminous skirt. So if you do want to shop in the upholstery section, be strategic about it.
Something else too is that if you are going to, like say the Textile Center has, Textile Center of Minnesota in Minneapolis has a couple of annual garage sales where people are getting rid of things that they have used that are mostly just like offcuts, remainders, relatively small quantities. I got 4 yards of beautiful upholstery fabric for $4, and it was of a width and a scale that's a little bit different from some of the, like when you're shopping, say, like just for quilting cotton or that kind of thing. And it has been useful for a variety of things, and it's just beautiful. And yeah, it's a little bit heavier, and maybe for your costuming purposes, you might not need something that's going to last the next 35 years. But you can also do things like not put the lining into something like that, or take some other breaks from sewing something 100% the way a pattern might tell you to, in order to make it a little more comfortable.
On the note of the Textile Center, they, in addition to the sales, they recently opened a thing called the Stashery, which is like a second hand, so you can donate excess craft supplies, you can go shopping. Stashery.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is it at the Textile Center?
Yes.
It's right on.
It is like it's basically like a small scale version of their like regular sale, but permanent. So with regular hours that you can just go shop. Or they have like, I think, donation days where they'll take in donations.
I think they want you to make appointments now.
Can I jump in?
Noted.
I work at the Textile Center.
Oh,
So the stashery does do appointments only. So please do not show up to the Textile Center with your donations. We will have to turn you away. But we are doing donations every hour when we are open. So we've been able to stretch that out, but we are full on donations through beginning of August is my call.
So then stashery hours.
Stashery hours are the same as Textile Center hours, and the center hours are Tuesday through Saturday. We're open 10 to 4, and then Thursdays we're open until 7.
Awesome. So I would love to segue this into where are you sourcing fabrics, guys?
Those Textile Center sales have been a godsend for me for years and years and years. Because there's just everything there and things that you haven't even imagined using in your costumes before if you haven't done.
I'm sorry, where?
The Textile Center. Yeah.
You will find there, and you will find extremely affordably, and they are really stepping into, especially now with Joanne gone, they're very timely and moving and stepping into that market.
If you're local to the Minnesota area or Minneapolis area, there are two S.R. Harris fabrics, which can be a little bit difficult to know what you're going to get. You kind of have to a certain extent, you have to be willing to take what they have or just go look for inspiration. Because especially with the exception really of their quilting cottons, they'll run out of stuff, they won't have it next time. So if you go in looking for a specific character, you need to be flexible in what you want, what you get.
And, you know, pack a snack and stay hydrated. Go to S.R. Harris. But remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Burnsville's a good gateway store. I miss Mill End.
Oh, I miss Mill End too.
We have Muller sign up for Mill End. They were awesome.
So if you were at the historical costuming panel this morning that Dana and I were both on, we talked a lot about, the question posed by the audience was, what do we do now that Joanna's gone? And so we gave out all of our favorite local fabric store recommendations. Definitely S.R. Harris is one. I've worked at local fabric stores for years. I worked at Treadle Yard Goods for 13 years.
R.I.P.
They have just recently closed.
Moment of silence for Treadle
Moment of
Yard.
silence for
Moment of
Treadle Yard.
silence
They were
for
here
Treadle.
for 45 some years. But now I'm working at a shop called So Inviting on Snelling in St. Paul. Great little shop. Sewing Lounge on Selby in St. Paul. Fantastic. It's a tiny shop with gorgeous fabrics. And these are all going to be apparel-based shops. There's tons of quilting shops, I know, but Knit and Bolt and Lake's Makery. Those are two shops in Minneapolis. I can't tell you exactly where, but you can look them up.
Bolt is in Northeast on Johnson Street.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, and all of those shops are going to specialize in garment fabrics, not quilting fabrics.
Knit and Bolts doesn't have a fantastic selection of garment fabrics. They do have it. They're a little more like
So Lake's Makery must be the one I'm thinking of that has a lot more garment.
probably
right?
like I've bought some. Like I got it was more of a cotton from there, but they don't have a huge like. I wouldn't go to them like looking for a nice linen.
Sure.
But
Right.
Quilters are branching out as well too lately, and they're quilting in cotton lawn and other substrates. So if you go to a quilt shop, you might find something that's not just cotton broadcloth.
Nice summer weight dress kind of stuff.
I was just going to say, if we want to move on to like online resources, one of my favorite is Fabric Wholesale Direct. They don't have a lot of patterns, they have a lot of basics, like lots of different types of solid color satins in every color, a lot of cotton broadcloth, linen. Most of it's solid color, but it's every color. So I would definitely recommend that as like a good starting point for online.
Could you say the name again? The door was open.
Fabric wholesaler.
Fabric Wholesale Direct.
Wholesaler.
And if you haven't done a lot of online fabric shopping, it's important to know your fabrics. Like, go out and do a little bit of research and just get your hands on some things first and then go look online.
Go touch fabric.
Yeah. If you are, so my tip is if you run across a fabric at an online store, go Google it.
Yeah.
If you don't know what the name is, because and that's the other thing is that there are certain names for things that are consistent, but then sometimes people call something different. So twill is which is a specific type of weave versus poplin is a straight weave, twill is the diagonal weave. But if you are making corsets, people will talk to you about you need coutille, and coutille or coutil is a twill. So it's the same thing, it's just a fancier version of twill.
it's a herringbone weave specifically.
Exactly, it's a
Yeah.
more specific, and it's a very durable, it's a really great fabric. So if you look at it and you're like, well, I don't know what coutille is, you look it up, you're like, oh, okay, it's a twill fabric. So that's something that can be helpful. I also know that most of these online stores, you have to plan ahead, but almost all of them will send you swatches for little to no money. Some of them are like $1 a swatch or whatever, and they'll send you good size swatches. So just know that if you are working on a project and you have the time to plan for it, I was making something where I needed 4-way stretch spandex. Spandex World, by the way, if you're looking for 4-way stretch spandex.
Spandex World is fantastic. That was going to be on my list. to
Highest
say.
quality
Yeah.
ever of spandex. And they sent me just a wad of samples for like $1 a piece that were so good that it was really easy for me to tell which one I wanted to use. And a reasonable price, too.
We'll take a question back here.
Yeah, it's actually more of a statement. Since Joann's closed down, Michaels has announced they're going to start carrying fabric.
Yep.
People aren't aware.
So Michaels is going to be carrying fabrics, if you didn't hear that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they
So-
bought all the Joanne.
So they bought the rights to the Joanne, prints. I will say for the record that I was like, awesome! I went to find my Joanne prints that I was like, didn't get around to buying or I need more of. Not a single one of them was bought by Michaels. I'm like, you did not buy any of my favorite prints.
Yeah, the in-store, a couple Michaels have fabrics, not all of them do yet.
Yeah.
Not yet.
And yeah, it is mostly quilting cottons.
Yep. Yeah.
Again, so yeah, I wouldn't go to Michaels for fabric at this point. Yeah.
Not quite.
It's a bit like going to Walmart for fabric. You can get it. You can definitely get it. And if you want to save a little money and, if you're not a very experienced sewer and you want to like practice on some stuff, that's a good way to go too.
Some other online resources, if you're looking for silks specifically, Silk Baron is a really great one. I know you've got some Silk Baron swatches in your binder. I saw that. And Dharma Trading, they have a lot of raw silks as well as dyes for them. If you're ever looking to getting into dyeing, that's a really, really great resource. I was going to mention Spandex World. There's another, I think Blue Moon is also a spandex focused one. I'm trying to like rack my brain for like my list. That's what I've got for now.
Can I throw something else out there? If you're looking to get into dyeing your own fabric, Dharma Trading is a really good resource for the fabric, but for dyes, especially natural dyes, I would go to Botanical Colors, which also has tons and tons of really good tutorials on how to use everything that they sell.
Could you spell that?
Botanical, Botanical, Colors.
I'm also going to throw out there, if you want to do dyeing, Textile Center has some amazing dye workshops, and Wet Paint Art Supply in St. Paul, fantastic resource for fabric dyes as well. Online fabric shopping, I just want to plug my other couple favorites, which is William Booth Draper. Is a great historical supplier, and Burnley and Trowbridge. Also, if you're looking to do historical stuff, they have all the stuff that you will need. Let's do yellow in the back.
Just as a tip for people doing very specific cosplays with very specific fabric patterns, it's not cheap, but if you are looking very specifically for, say, Janet from The Good Place's blouse fabric, Spoonflower will have things like that, and you can, they will send you samples of what their different kinds of fabric that you can get that in, whether you're looking, if you're looking for more of a blousey fabric versus cotton weight fabric. It's not a cheap way of doing things, but if you are really trying to aim for something that's very screen accurate, it can be helpful for those kinds of things.
And they'll print on multiple types of fabric.
That's what I'm saying.
Substrates now.
Yeah.
Yep, and they'll send you a little box.
Yeah.
They'll send you a little box so that you can feel the different weights of fabrics, so that you know what their minky feels like, what their crepe feels like, so then if you're using that, you know what you're ordering.
So, and if you're doing cosplay, then Spoonflower, people will go onto Spoonflower, upload designs for very specific stuff. And sometimes, you can't use copyrighted character names, but if you go and you search for Doctor Who 6 Doctor Blue Polka Dotted Tie, you will find that fabric. Ask me how I know. And it'll say like space traveler dots.
Yeah.
So you can find a lot of really specific stuff.
Yeah, they put in generic cereal, their names.
There are also other people who are doing custom prints out there for cosplay. I would like to shout out Dangerous Ladies up in Canada who do really fantastic work. They not only do like custom print runs of specific fabrics for characters and kits, they also do like resin kits and molds, prop kits, 3D print patterns. They're really fantastic, and they are getting more and more into the fabric game from what it looks like. They are a great resource.
Can you repeat the name of that one?
Dangerous Ladies.
You know, and I honestly have a lot of good luck on eBay.
On eBay,
Yeah.
Before we started, you guys were talking down there about going to thrift stores.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Source of fabric from thrift stores.
You never know what you'll find, but you often find something good.
I love me some thrift store shopping. Half of what I'm wearing came from a thrift store. And my friend went to a thrift store by her house and found 6 bolts of, it was polyester blend fabric, which 6 giant bolts of fabric for like $10 a bolt. And it was like 20 yards of fabric. So she's been gifting it to people like Santa Claus of fabric.
So I want to move on to things that you see as kind of beginner mistakes, either ones that you guys have made yourselves or that you see, and how to avoid that in your fabric selection.
Pre-wash. We did some, I'm going to talk about this in the next panel too. So the costume shop where I was at, I found at SR Harris the most beautiful woven fabric, and it was like the perfect weight for skirts. And it was this lovely multi-color weave, and weave is, I mean, it's hard to find for inexpensive for, you know, for the Renaissance times in particular. And we made a bunch of skirts out of it. And we always pre-washed our bodice fabrics because bodices, you gotta pre-wash. But we were kind of lazy about pre-washing skirt and pant fabric and shirt fabric because if we, I mean, we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of yards of fabric that we would have to try to pre-wash. So we didn't pre-wash them. And, oh my God, those turned into, they looked like weird mushrooms that grow on the side of you, those shelf mushrooms. They just kind of, because you're cutting out a bias, and the whole skirt just went, it was about 7 inches shorter than they were before. So yeah, so pre-wash it before you make it, unless you're not planning to wash it at all. My other one that people may not know is that you can wash something. It's the dryer that's really the killer. So if you do anything where you're doing multiple types of fabric, this skirt is every type of fabric known to man on it, and there's cottons in there, synthetics. This goes in the washer just fine. I do not dry it. I just hang it dry. So sometimes when they say it's dry clean only, you can wash it gentle cold water and hang it up and dry it. As long as it doesn't go in the dryer, you're usually pretty safe. So that's kind of the other mistake I see people. Renaissance Festival people, they make they can't figure out why their costume didn't survive and when someone else's lasted a long time. It's because they dried their doublet or they dried their bodice. It's like, do not dry it if it's multiple.
I will say, sometimes you can dry fabrics that you're not technically supposed to, but you need to essentially pre-shrink them in the dryer before you make something.
100%.
Another mistake, circle skirts, you need to let them hang for 24 hours before you pin them because they're cut both on grain and on the bias. Bias stretches with gravity. So if you cut a circle skirt, hem it, and then hang it up, your skirt is going to be longer in some spots because the bias will stretch.
You can speed that process slightly. Some fabrics want to stretch and stretch and stretch for like days and days and weeks, but you can speed it up a little bit by wetting the hem of the garment and letting the weight of that water on it pull it down a little bit and sort of like fast track your stretching.
So panel, any other beginner mistakes to avoid that you feel like you want to share? Maybe something we can do some confessions, maybe something that we've done.
I think knowing your sewing machine and how to use your sewing machine is really important. Read your manual. Oftentimes your manual will have lots and lots of really important information about the type of needle that you need depending on what you're sewing. and other sort of troubleshooting tips. And if you get gifted a sewing machine, as is often the case, or you find one at a thrift store, most of the manuals, even for some of the older machines, can be found online nowadays. So check those out for sure.
Yeah, needles make a difference. When you're using shears, ballpoint is awesome.
I love Microtex needles. Everyone should be getting Microtex needles. They're so good. They are specifically great for like delicate fabrics or things that you're having a hard time like getting a needle to go through. They are delightful.
Those super tight weave sheeting fabrics, cotton sheeting fabrics, Microtex.
Microtex will just go right through that. It's great.
And that's like the one thing I'll confess to is I've done a lot of rust dyeing of fabric, which is also super easy. But when you rust dye fabrics, you're getting iron deposits into the weave of the fabric. And if you try to run that through your sewing machine, you're getting sad, because it's just like putting a piece of metal underneath that needle. It will break. It does not want to go through there. And so, you have to, if you're going to mess with that, you have to kind of do a little research and know what you're doing. And using those types of tools is sometimes one way of getting around that.
For beginners, choosing your fabrics, partly also choosing fabrics that are at least a little bit easier to use rather than really, really difficult fabrics. The sheerer and or slinkier a fabric is, the more difficult it is to use. So if you have your first costume and you're making it out of like chiffon, I'm so sorry. But choosing something out of a cotton or maybe a thicker satin, something like that is going to be a lot easier than something that's silkier and slinkier. One of my favorites is, and this actually goes back to things having different names, Duchess satin, matte satin, and Pied de Soie are all the same. And it is my favorite type of satin to work with. It's thicker and sturdier, so it doesn't nearly as much. So yeah, if you need a satin, I would recommend using that one.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. I noticed that it's very similar to what Joanne was calling their casa satin, except for the casa has the stretch to it. But yeah, it's that nice, beefy
Technically,
satin.
Casa was the brand,
Yeah.
and it was any type of dress fabric,
Yeah.
not just satin.
Well, I'm just saying, specifically their satin, what they were calling that was, the Duchess satin. Don't use crepe back satin if it's your first project ever.
Don't make your life hard.
Don't make your life hard.
Don't buy velvet right away. I feel like we all know this, but I'm saying it out loud. Don't start with velvet. And if you do, just hand-based the devil out of it.
Velveteen is a great replacement for velvet, because velveteen doesn't have that velvet nap. Because it's the nap of the velvet that is causing it to want to shift around. My trick with velvet, Wonder Under or Stitch Witchery.
I will also say that if you are looking to get into more challenging fabrics like velvets, often natural fibers behave a little bit nicer. Like if you can find a cotton velvet, that's a really great starter velvet versus starting with a synthetic.
Velour is not velvet.
That's true. Velour is a stretch.
Velour is not velvet.
I'll share a story. There was a man who came into sewing class with me at one point several years ago, and he seemed like he had a lot of experience sewing. He said, I can't figure out how to get these two fabrics when I'm sewing them to stop shifting. And we're like, okay, well, have you hand-basted it? He said, yes, I've hand-basted it. I'm like, well, have you tried like glue stick? He said, I've tried glue stick. I said, well, how many pins are you using? And he said, well, I'm not using pins. Yeah, and I think it's because he saw like videos of industrial sewing where you don't use pins in industrial sewing, but when you're a medium skilled home sewer like I am, then you use some pins. Yeah, they're there for you. More slippery, more pins. More curves, more pins.
Or Stitch Witchery.
Yeah.
I do a lot of trimming. I do a lot of like ribbon trim, and I just glue it all down with Stitch Witchery first, and I run it through the machine.
So you do stitch it down?
Oh yeah.
Do you trust the washability on that?
Oh heck no. No. This is I don't use, people are like, oh, iron on hem tape. It's like that, to me, that is the step you do before you sew it down.
Yeah.
But I have found like some of the hardest to work with fabrics if I just glue it together with stitchwitchery at first and appliques, I learned it out at festival for the ladies who did the sewing of all the banners you see out there. They use Wonder Under, which is essentially a sheet of glue that you can cut to any shape you want.
The difference between Wonder Under and Stitch Witchery is that Wonder Under has a paper backing, which I find to be a little easier.
Very useful.
But it's like a sheet of iron-on glue.
Yep, and then you just iron it to whatever you're appliquing, you stick it on your thing, you iron it down, and now you can trim over the top of it without it moving, and you don't have to pin anything.
Honestly, I've made so many appliques, I've never thought to use it for line trim.
Freaking-tastic, yeah. I do a lot of like multiple lines of trim, and I will do it all, I'll glue it all down first. And my whole jester costume is done that way. Yeah.
Okay. I feel like we had somebody with a question in the audience. Okay, do you want to go?
I was just gonna ask, well, just now actually, is the Stitch Witchery then, is that like a liquid glue on, or is that?
No, it's a dry, like papery sort of sheet.
It's like an interfacing.
Yeah,
it's
it's
like a sheet.
Yep, the only
Yeah.
difference between the Stitch Witchery and the Wonder Under, they're both a papery glue sheet, but the Wonder Under has a peel-off backing, so if you want to like draw your shape of applique on it, you do that on the paper
Cut
backing.
it out. And use paper scissors when you cut it out. And then Stitch Witchery just comes on a roll, so that's a good one. They have it in 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch. And that's a good one with, that's what I use for ribbon, just because it's just easier to roll
It's
it out.
already.
Yeah, and then it's already one strip. But yeah, Wonder Under for sure.
And then I was gonna say too, with the heavier stuff that you're like not supposed to dry, like any wool weight, I think, Sarah, you mentioned this in the corsetry panel, but if you lay it out on a towel and then put another towel down and then like squeeze the dickens out of it to try to bring the moisture
This is
out.
how I do washable corsets for theater.
Yeah.
You just basically lay a towel out and you lay your corset or whatever thing that you're trying to get dry quicker at, and basically just roll it up like a little burrito, and then just squeeze the dickens out of it. And you get as much water out of it as possible, as quickly as possible, so that it's not sitting in wet for forever, especially if you have components that might rust.
Yeah, and like the few times I've had to wash my like wool weight cloaks for a festival, that's how I've dried them, is done that first and then let it hang dry, because those thicker wools, if you are just like, just dry by yourself, like they'll mold.
Yeah,
honestly.
they take so long. Fans are also really helpful, especially if you're like I am sometimes doing mascot stuff. It does need to be washed, unfortunately. If you have like big, thick, soft foam, like fans, squeezing things dry with towels as much as possible. And truly, the box fan is there for you if you want to dry out stuff like that.
Yeah.
Drying racks as well, rather than a line. If you have a drying rack that's a big open flat, like a screen, that's nice for more airflow.
Yeah.
I have like so many drying racks down in my basement. If you can't wash it, alcohol, vodka. Cheapest vodka you can find, and you just
Put it in a little spray
Make it
bottle.
smell nicer.
test it first on like an inside.
Make sure it's not a fabric that's not going to water stain.
Yeah, that's true. So on washing though, I just also wanted to throw, when we were talking about washing wool just now, there are a lot of fabrics that are washable that they don't tell you are washable. When a garment says dry clean only, this is often because the manufacturer, they're hedging their bets kind of a little bit. They don't want you to call them and say, oh, well, the color bled, they're like, yeah. But you can hand wash cashmere sweaters, you can hand wash any wool at all. If you hand wash silks, some of them will change texture. That doesn't mean that they'll be unusable as fabric though. Like a silk taffeta, it's really crisp. If you wash it, it's gonna lose the crispness. But it will still be a nice fabric. You might wanna experiment with that. Other thing to worry about is color bleeding. So if you're washing something that says dry clean only, often it's because it's gonna bleed. Let's do blue back here.
Yeah, I got two bits. One, when you talk about like that textile, if you imagine that quote unquote natural fiber we were talking about, shampoo, right? Like it's fur, it's hair, so that's when like every few months or years you see that tip from Jenna Leone or whoever, and it's like, oh, that's how I wash it, it's baby shampoo, but that's it. Like what is wool if not? That's one way you find it quote unquote less expensive. But then my question, talking about washing things, is you talk about synthetic fur, especially on your arm cuffs. How do you recommend things like that, like the fabric brocade, that synthetic fur? washing that kind of material, do you have any recommendations for that?
Absolutely. So synthetic fur can definitely be washed. It can even be washed in a machine. I would do it inside out. Ideally, if you have a garment, I would flip it inside out. I would chuck it in the machine, do it on cold, do it on... I don't wash anything not on cold and delicate, if I'm being real. Like, after a certain point of working with textiles, you don't use hot water unless you absolutely need to, or you're trying to shrink something intentionally. But I would wash it on cold and delicate. I would not put it in a dryer is the main thing. So the thing about fur is that the heat will clump it up and melt the fibers. I would, again, this is box fans. I would flip your garment right side out again. I am like, in my brain, this is a fursuit, so that's the instructions I'm giving you. If you have like a large amount of fur, but really anything, flip it right side out, get a box fan on it, and then once it's starting to be dry, you can go ahead and brush it. If you find your fibers sticking together a little bit, you can take a hair dryer on low, and you can just kind of like blow it in the direction in the direction of your fur, and you can untangle it a little bit. Okay, so I used to work for a company that makes mascots, and we would use forks for this.
That is just the pet brushes.
Yeah,
the plastic, not the metal. But
Yeah, so the pet brushes are great if you want a really silky look, but if you're only trying to detangle it a little bit or you have rough tangles, you want something hardier than a pet brush, and you don't want to be ripping it out that much. Start with a fork and move to a pet brush. If you've got really bad like clumps and tangles, say it was being worn in like a theme park, I don't know, theoretically.
Let's do pink and then orange.
Two really quick questions. One, have you ever used that fabric, they're like sheets that you put in the wash and they're supposed to help with fabric bleeding, and do they really work?
The color catching sheets.
Yeah, do they work?
No, I've never used them.
Mixed results.
They do catch color, but they're not necessarily going to keep it from bleeding 100%.
And then the other question is, now when you talk about the fursuits and the tangles, if my cat has a really bad tangle, I'll take cornstarch and rub it into the cat's fur, because that helps me get the knots out, and cornstarch is safe for cats, and it's not to hurt them. So I was wondering if, because cornstarch it's slippery.
Yeah.
So
Like dry shampoo.
Yeah,
For your fursuit.
Well, dry shampoo is
I feel like I would need to wash it again after that.
Wig conditioner also works, because wig conditioner is
isn't going to
lubricant.
dye anything or bleed anything.
That's true.
Yeah.
We had orange back here.
I couldn't hear everything, but my question is, what is your best favorite method for setting color to keep it from bleeding? Because my very first outfit I made, and I run a festival in another state, it rained, and I was asked to pose with somebody else who put their arm around me. Their white shirt is now blue.
So there is a color removing product that if I get a fabric that I find is bleeding a lot, if the fabric bleeds a lot, I'm going to try to find something else, because often they will just keep bleeding.
Yeah.
But if you're going for it, there's a product you can use that's sold adjacent to fabric dyes that is a color remover, and I can't remember the name of it if anybody remembers, but it will remove the excess dye from the fabric.
I will say that is one thing I do use the sheets for, is when I'm first washing fabric, the sheet will have the color on it, and then I'll wash it again, and if it's white still, I know that it's not bleeding anymore.
Yeah.
So
That's a little test.
With dyeing fabrics too, sometimes they will tell you to use salt water, a saltwater bath to stabilize the dye, or, it just depends on what kind of dye you're using, but there are other methods that are probably best for when you're doing an organic process, not when you've got, something synthetic.
Post dye, especially on synthetics, I mean, heat setting is also a very important step that we should not skip.
We had green next.
I have a really specific fabric choice question. If you were going to make your first pair of hose for a Renaissance fair, what kind of fabric would you
Lightweight wool.
Lightweight wool,
Absolutely.
like a woven?
Lightweight woven wool. Yep,
Okay.
because if you're making cut and sewn hose, the only thing that's going to do it is wool, because nothing else has the stretch. and the sort of drape and weight that a wool's gonna have. If you try to do it with something else, it's just not gonna do it.
Yeah, especially if you want to be historically accurate. If you're not going to pick up, like, because you could pick up like a 4-way stretch cotton spandex.
Like if you're just making tights, you just wanna knit.
Yeah,
Like you're just making a pair of tights. But if you're making like a Tudor cut and sewn with the weird ankle gusset foot hose,
gotta be wool.
I would say like try for a wool flannel. And they're generally not as heavy as they sound, but yeah.
Also pay attention to your warp and weft, or your bias and non-bias. I would go online and look at, because there are instructions for how best to cut a hose on a bias, that there are experts out there that could show you exactly how to cut those pieces, because once you invest that money, you want to make sure you cut it right so it stretches in the right way.
So Tudor Tailor,
Yes.
if you have the Tudor Tailor book, they have a step-by-step guide on how to cut and fit the hose on an actual body. Yeah. Okay, I think we had pink next.
One of the problems I've run into with thrift store purchases is they Febreze the hell out of
They do.
And I have spent so much time and effort trying to get that smell out. The only thing I found that works is just something in either a vinegar bath or a peroxide water bath. Is there anything better than
Salt water will do it too.
I would go for vinegar also.
Yeah, in theater with those teenagers. We put vinegar and baking soda in the washing machine with the soap and the costumes to wash all together. So
Other than that, I do several washes. If it smells like somebody else's fabric softener, then I'll just do several washes in unscented detergent. So, orange.
This was actually just a suggestion that somebody was talking about hose. And I made like 3 grams of bias that hose using Tudor Tailor pattern. So if you're looking for good wool for that, Pendleton Woolen Mill has a seconds section where you can often find really, like, it's still kind of expensive because it's wool, but cheap for good wool for bias cut hose, like the flannel that you were talking about. I have found sometimes they only have pattern stuff, and they have like that classic like thick flannel striping. But I've also found like some of their like dye, grayish color, which is infinitely dyeable.
So the seconds are delicately flawed.
Yes.
Like many of us.
Although honestly, I'm not a professional, I can't entirely tell the difference. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. They're really nice. So that was just a suggestion.
Thank you.
Love
that.
Thank you so much.
We've got yellow in the back.
So for pre-washing, what do you do about fraying?
You're going to want to take and sew a stay stitch along the cut edge of your fabric. If you have a serger, you can serge it. If you have a long length of fabric, sew the 2 cut ends together to make a loop to reduce twisting.
Oh, that's, I've never.
That's not what we always just ran through the main line afterwards.
Anybody else want to throw? Blue and back.
Not textile related, but where are y'all buying patterns without Joann's? Like, where are your favorite places to go?
Never bought patterns at Joann's.
Commercial patterns are notoriously not very good.
No. I would go online if you know specifically the name of the garment that you're trying to find a pattern for. You can very often, very, very cheaply buy downloadable patterns, and as long as you have the ability to print them out and put them together, they can be a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle after you can print out 25 pieces of paper that's printed or something. But you're also maybe paying $2.99 for the pattern.
So I'm going to throw out there too, if you do buy PDF patterns, I don't tape mine together anymore. Taping them together is the way to madness. So you can send the files to a local fabric store. Most of the small local fabric stores in the cities will print those PDF patterns on a large format printer. No taping required.
I will say also, as just a word of caution, if you're looking for patterns online, we are living in the age of AI. Many of these patterns are AI generated. Please look for the warning signs. Look for patterns that actually include directions. Descriptions that look like they are written by human beings. Look for things that aren't just weird line drawings, that also have produced sample garments on the list.
And I have
be
shoes coming to class.
diligent,
Yeah.
especially if you're looking on like Etsy.
Look
Be
for those
diligent,
people
yeah.
who know what they're doing. Margot Anderson, truly Victorian. Go to the Elizabethan Costume Facebook page. They have recommendations. And they were talking about Matt, the Tudor tailor in that group. These are people who have done their research and created these things. So there's several of those to look for.
Something else on Etsy to check if it's an AI pattern or not. Look at the reviews. If the reviews are just 5 stars, great pattern, that very well might be an AI review. Sort them lowest to highest.
You can check patternreview.com for just what it sounds like, reviews of patterns. You can read stuff for free even if you don't have a membership. So patternreview.com will tell you real people's reviews and photos and everything. And a lot of it is focused on modern sewing, but I think if you're doing cosplay, a lot of these patterns you might be using are going to be a more modern pattern that you're adapting into what you need.
What was that Elizabethan?
Elizabethan costume page. Yeah, Elizabethan costume. I don't know. I just know it's Noel Guggen Hoover. It's Noel Guggen something is the original founder of that page. It's a very well moderated. Yeah, they know their stuff.
So that's a Facebook group?
Yep, Facebook group, Elizabethan costume group.
Let's do blue over here.
Yeah, plug the stashery again for patterns.
Stashery patterns at the Textile Center.
They are 2 for $1, so all of them.
Wow, fantastic.
Come stock up. The Textile Center. And then the other one is circling back to the color removing agent.
Yeah.
Is that potentially Synthropol?
Yes, it is Synthropol. Thank you.
We're gonna have a trivia night, I think. Textile trivia. Next thing coming to the Textile Center.
Yellow in the back, please.
Just a note on like looking for AI, like I'm having trouble with like all the shrinkflation stuff and sorting reviews from newest to oldest. Because even stuff I'm rebuying has changed.
Good tip. And green and back.
Another place for patterns, I recently just used this for a cosplay thing. If you're looking for like really simple garment stuff, there's a website called Sewist.com that has a pattern designing, like, it's kind of like a menu decision tree thing. You pick like a dress and then like a silhouette, and it adds like kind of step by step like the length and everything, and then you put in your measurements and somebody basically adjusts a stock pattern, and then they email it to you custom and you just print it out. And I used it for me, worked like a charm. It was like $3. And and you can mess around with it like all for free. So it's
Sorry, back to thrift stores, go a lot because I have gotten really decent patterns at thrift stores. And again, you're not costuming patterns, but what you look for is a silhouette. So you can get some, and then you can Frankenstein costumes or patterns together. You like the sleeveness and a modesty list and the waist and that. Get an old sheet and Frankenstein things together.
So panelists, final tips for people choosing fabrics, especially beginners. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and say, don't forget you can underline a fabric. So, if you know what interfacing is, this is not the same thing. So underlining a fabric is the process of taking kind of a thinner fabric and putting it wrong sides together with another fabric, say for example, silk taffeta backed with cotton flannel. This is a thing that's done in couture sewing. And again, couture sewing books are great references. But if you have a fabric you want to make look a little nicer, you can underline. You can underline with flannel, you can underline with silk organza, you can underline with broadcloth if you need to. Try it out. That might help your fabric have a different look.
We do that a lot in theater. It's a lot of bodices, also called flatlining sometimes. We do a lot of bodices flatlined to couture or something stiffer. It's a lot of skirts flatlined in silk organza, like you were talking about. It adds just like a little bit of body, and also you can sew your hem to only that under layer, so then you just get like the beautiful, like clean skirt hem. Flatlining is a very, very big thing in theater. We're doing it on like everything.
Mock-ups? we didn't really talk about that, but make mock-ups. Thrift stores, go get some sheets, go get some curtains, go get some tablecloths, and if you don't, if it's not pretty enough to use for the project, use it as a mock-up. And once you, because don't cut that, especially if you're going to somewhere like Burley and Towbridge and you're buying the really awesome stuff, don't cut the expensive stuff for your very first thing you're sewing. Make the mock-up first, and then once you fitted it, you can write all over it and do all that, and then pull it apart and use that as your pattern, and then you can make the good thing.
Try to do something that you can put your hands on. Also, just off the mock-up, try to use a fabric similar weight to your final fabric for your mock-up. Yeah, try to get your hands, like literally get your hands on the fabric you're going to use before you decide to use it. Because it might look like one thing online and then feel like a completely different thing.
We are just about out of time.
Estate sales as well as thrift stores.
Yes, dead people stuff.
That's all.
Final thoughts?
This is probably a little bit too basic for some of you as sewers, but I find myself constantly surprised by the number of people that have never taken their own measurements or learned how to take their own measurements. And not all of us, in fact, hardly any of us, are going to fit into the sizes that patterns say they are. And depending on the company making the pattern, if you're buying something commercial like that, you will find that a size means one thing in one brand and another thing in another brand, just like with clothing. So learn how to take your own measurements and always look for those guides on the backs of patterns, and also go to YouTube and just find some tips on altering patterns, because you would probably want to do that anyway for your comfort and for the best fit.
We are out of time. Thank you all so much for coming. If you